Live. How's it going, everyone? Today we have a special guest with us building privacy on the Solana blockchain. The goal behind this is to scale blockchain privacy to millions and eventually billions. Users will be able to do this via Light Cash, which is a GUI or a GUI built on top of the Light protocol, which has identified themselves for the massive need of privacy, which we see on other blockchains, but not necessarily on Solana. So a lot is going on under the hood here, but luckily we have Sven, one of the co-founders of Light Protocol, joining us today. How's it going, man?
Pretty good.
Yeah,
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's awesome to have you on here. And I know we've been chatting a bit here at the Mountain DAO. So great to hear about what you're building, and figured it'd be amazing to have you on for a podcast. So really, just to start things off, can you outline what Light Protocol is and the goal behind it?
Sure, yeah. So we're building privacy infrastructure on Solana. So basically, we're trying to help protect user data at scale.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And we see this on other blockchains, but no one has done it on Solana. I mean,
right.
I remember before you guys even showed up, they're like, oh yeah, Light Protocol is coming. Like, this is sweet. Everyone was starting to talk about it. So now that it's here, it's great we're doing the podcast. Do you want to touch on a little bit behind the team, where are you guys from, and the idea is that, like, what were the beginnings behind this? How did you guys decide to start this?
Sure, yeah. So we're two co-founders. We're from Germany. And so it's a bit far. We're right now in Salt Lake City, right? So last year, my co-founder, Joe, he started building this. Basically, he forked Tornado Cash, and he was like trying to build private voting.
Uh-huh.
So basically, you could just vote anonymously on the blockchain. And that's when he kind of realized, well, you could just use this kind of technology, like zero knowledge proofs, and build so much more than just sending money around anonymously. Like all those different use cases. And it's where it kind of started, and he was like started to work on how that could go. And so yeah, I joined a couple months ago, so mid last year. And we're good friends from childhood days, and we met up, and he was like, "Oh, Sven, like, I have this idea. We could just use Solana and enable all these sort of things." And I was like hooked, and so we joined, and this project and kind of morphed into what Light Protocol is now.
Yeah, that's awesome. And building Light Protocol on Solana, it's not like you guys could literally just copy and paste it over from Ethereum. How has that been, building it and doing it in Rust and kind of dealing with all of that? Has that been a little bit of a pain? How's the learning curve been overall?
Yes, incredibly. So like it's an incredible pain to build on Solana, but it's also so rewarding, right? That's what I love about Rust and Solana is there's so many constraints, but just on a technical level as well, it's super fascinating. And then also learning curve has been really great because it's super young ecosystem, so there's so much to figure out still. And also, yeah, just how we kind of brought zero knowledge proofs and verification on Solana. It's basically you just need to make it work within the runtime. So there's like this compute budget that the Solana runtime has, and you just need to make the algorithm work in this compute budget. So we just split up into many different instructions, and that's how you bring zero knowledge proofs on Solana.
Yeah, that's really interesting to hear about, and I'm not too technical myself, so it's great to hear you break it down. You may have lost me a little bit there, but even just moving forward here, so you guys do have Light Cash, and this is supposed to be the front end that is easy for users to use. What is the idea for this, and how simple is it for users to leverage this privacy?
Right. So the idea behind Light Cash is there's this immediate use case where we have a lot of people talking to us, and they're like, we want to trade, but we don't want to be copy traded, and we don't want to be connected to our net worth. So like, when I send friends some money, I don't want them to see all my net worth that I made accumulating all my tokens while trading. And so like Cash is just this application. It's just this thin user interface on top of the protocol itself that allows you to fund wallets anonymously. So that's what you can do. It's like if I had to pick an analogy, it's like prepaid cards for crypto.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And there's even use cases. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Mountain Pay that we have up there. That
Yeah,
actually, my roommate here at the Mountain Dow, TJ, he put that up in like 48 hours. But that was something he was talking about as well. He's like,
yeah,
even hooking into the privacy for that, because people don't want to be able to see, even purchasing simple things like that. It goes on the blockchain. You don't necessarily need that to be public. So that was something that he was talking about, and he'd be like, oh, that would be pretty interesting to leverage. So that's just one of those simple use cases that I've already picked up and people have identified on seeing that. And so moving forward, what is the actual process here in layman terms of how you guys are able to create the privacy? Is it similar to the Tornado Cash infrastructure? Do you want to outline the idea behind that for anyone who may not be familiar?
sure, yeah. So technically, right now, it's very similar to how Tornado Cash does it, and not so much the Tornado Cash as I think many people know it, but a new version of Tornado Cash, which is called Tornado Nova, which is basically Zcash in a smart contract. So you put tokens into a pool, and you can transact within that pool privately. Under the hood, on a technical level, you have like UTXOs, unspent transaction outputs, like with Bitcoin, and that's how you can send money around without actually sending it around. And it all happens privately because of zero knowledge proof verification. And then you can also withdraw from the pool again into a normal address, and withdraw into a new address, like, because with zero knowledge proof verification, you don't need to. You can basically prove to the program that you deposited a certain amount of tokens without showing, oh, this is a transaction, like this is the signer and all that stuff that boxes you basically on the blockchain.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And really just moving forward here, what are the variables that are incorporated here? If it was just me and you trying to use Light Cash or Tornado Cash, there would obviously be issues. Do you want to touch on the variables that go into what needs to happen for the privacy to actually be able to exist?
Okay, yeah, sure. So the biggest thing probably is that this pool, like it's clear what goes into the pool and what comes out of the pool, right? Like you can see the transactions going in.
Yeah.
And so you want to have a certain set of deposits going in before you withdraw, because otherwise you could just, someone could just run a simple algorithm and just figure out, oh, yeah, well, that's pretty sure that you actually deposited the money and then withdrew it a couple hours later or whatever.
Yeah.
So you need a certain set of deposits before you withdraw. And so what that is basically throughput, usage, liquidity. So that's the single most important thing that we'll optimize against in the future. And then there are a couple of other things, like you can also still dox yourself if you use a wallet and you withdraw into a wallet that had transactions previously. It's also connected to other public things on the blockchain. So there are a couple of those variables as well, but they're not so prevalent.
Awesome. Yeah. So the main one is getting really this throughput. What is the idea of how you guys want to? I think something you guys coined is like, how do you get this flywheel moving out of the gate?
Right. Yeah. So there's this kind of, for those who don't know, like there's this flywheel analogy, which is basically that if you have a certain amount of like you have a great user experience, that actually helps attract more users, and those users then drive down the cost and the time it takes to be able to withdraw again, and that in turn makes the user experience better, which is in this kind of flywheel, and enables those kind of frictionless privacy eventually. That's this analogy, and yeah. So the interesting thing is, okay, how do you start, right? And what we believe is that by using Solana as the execution layer, we're able to have super cheap costs. It's like around $50 right now, even now as in the first version, and it takes around 15 seconds a transaction, and so it's super cheap and it's super fast, and that already gives this kind of user experience that you need to get things going. And then the second step from there on is we built this infrastructure, like this SDK, where we want to enable many more use cases. So we want to really work closely with a lot of protocols and developers on Solana, so they can integrate private transactions. And they all use our shared single liquidity pool, which helps spin the flywheel.
Awesome. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And I think there's a couple things to pick apart. And I think the idea of starting seems daunting in the sense, how do we get enough throughput?
Right.
But I think there's a couple things. And one, you really touched on the fact that it's around 50 cents, 15 seconds to get through versus on Ethereum. I mean, the fees are probably $50 just for like half, or depending on obviously the gas and what we're looking at for all of that. I also think a big thing is LightProtocol will be one of the de facto privacy tools on Solana in the beginning. There's not anywhere else where you can do this, and there's obviously demand we're seeing, and it'll be on it, like we won't know the natural demand till it goes live. But so far, we're seeing a lot of use of it on other blockchains like Ethereum, Binance Smart Chain. So being the first, I think, also just kickstarts that flywheel. And once it gets going, it sounds like it'll start to perpetuate itself. And then it's not like you guys are just putting it out and, okay, we hope more users are going to use it. You're integrating other things, looking how to get more volume through protocols. So I think that's really interesting to touch on all of those things. Something that I am curious to touch on, and you actually mentioned you guys are grinding away at it as we speak, but smart contract risk is always important in blockchains. And I think there's a few different angles to look at, but what are your guys' thoughts on smart contract security, and how are you looking to promote that, and what's the general outlook for that?
Right. So, I mean, obviously smart contract security is like the biggest thing that you have to take care of when you build any smart contract. And there's a lot of change happening, but yeah, I mean, just one thing that shows how hard this thing is the wormhole hack, which happened I think last week or the week before.
Yep.
Because those people who built wormhole, like, they're among the most talented engineers and security researchers, and so it can happen to anyone, to the best people. There's this element of human error that you can't get out of it, but obviously there are a lot of steps you can do to make it as safe as possible.
100%.
And so what we do right now, actually today, we started off our audit. So we have this audit going with cryptographic specialists, security researchers, and they are looking at it now. And then also recently we open sourced the code base, because we think that the more people look at the code, the safer we can make it in the long term.
Yeah.
So, and also, I mean, yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, and I think the big thing, if I'm not mistaken, you guys are still only on DevNet, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, so between all of those things, it's important. Like, what I'm seeing is you guys are going out of the way, getting second eyes. Not only second eyes, you guys are taking the risk of open sourcing your code, putting it out to other people for the thought of security, having other people look it over. So I think that's really good. And then even the idea of not rushing it to mainnet, putting it on DevNet. I mean, there's a lot of projects that'll just go straight to mainnet and start testing things. So between all of those things, I think it's important to see. And something that is pretty common that I see talking to projects is it's important that people are knowledgeable of smart contract risk and they understand the risk behind it, looking at things like the wormhole hack, looking at lending and borrowing like cream finance, and even understanding that audits aren't the holy grail, but these are the things that in the industry, if we continue to take these steps, it'll only reduce the risks more and more. So I think that's something that is important to touch on. And in general, I think it was just sweet that you're like, hey, can we push this back 15, 20 minutes? Because you're grinding away there, making sure that everything is in line for the audits. So I think that's really cool to touch on. And moving forward here, I'm curious, like, we touched on this a little, but how has it been so far building on Solana? I know you guys have just landed at the Mountain DAO, but have you been able to catch interest from other protocols or start working with other teams yet? If not, what is the general consensus of why Solana?
The general consensus of why Solana, that's an interesting question. Like, let's get back to that. First,
Yeah.
the question about kind of the interest from the community. So, yeah, it's been super cool so far. There were a couple of developers also here at Mountain Dog who were like, oh, you're like protocol, I want to do X, Y, Z. So you mentioned TJ who wants to do Solana Pay. We talked, and he's definitely interested. And we have a couple other people who are interested in embedding private transactions in their project. So there is one project that wants to do private minting of NFTs. And then there's also a big community of Anons. It's called 888 Anon XYZ.
Okay.
It's a nice community. And they're super engaged about privacy on Solana. And so they also want to like see what we can build with privacy. And a couple of others. But obviously, like that's the most important. Also, going to be much more of our focus now, heading into the future, is getting to talk to more and more developers, and also encouraging people, maybe incentivizing them to build with privacy.
Yeah.
Because there's so much work to be done yet.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear. And just in general, it really sounds like you guys are positioned in a great place where the developer ecosystem on Solana is very willing to cooperate. I mean, I've seen this through multiple projects. It also is privacy is something that is very much needed, especially in the idea of decentralized finance. Like this is a big worry for a lot of people getting into the space. So seeing these integrations, also just you landing here at Mountain DAO. I know you've only been here for a few days, but moving forward, it seems like the snowball just started rolling. In the beginning, what you guys were making sure you actually had a product, a protocol that was working before you went out and found all your partners. But it seems the general interest is there. And so I'm curious to ask from there, like, oh, I had something, but it just popped out. Like it was something actually pretty decent. But no, so to move forward, and I'll probably come back to my question. I'm starting to get down to the bottom here, but I'm curious just in general. Oh, this is what it was.
Cool.
So far, what's the read on the Mountain DAO Hacker House? What has it been like being here so far? How long have you been here? I think this will be your first full week, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
My 2 cents on it, just real quick, is I think it's cool that it's month long because people are being really productive. And that's a general sentiment I've gotten, that the other ones, when it's just over the weekend, it just turns into a lot of fun. Whereas here, Monday through Friday, people are head down.
And it is a lot of fun as well.
Oh yeah, a ton of fun.
Yeah, definitely. I liked it. I liked the concept of it. And also, I mean, yeah, I think Edgar, so the Margify guys, and also Cypher Protocol people did an amazing job.
Yeah.
And setting this whole thing up, getting the sponsors, and also just getting all the people to come to Salt Lake City to do this for a whole month. And it's super, super exciting to see all those people working. And also, obviously, it's nice meeting people, getting to know them. I mean, there's also always a trade-off, right? Like when you go to in-person events and you go to hack houses and all that stuff, there's always that's always takes energy. So you also need to figure out, how does this fit into my priorities? But for us, it's just perfect timing, and it's so much worthwhile.
Yeah, 100%. So I think that balance between month long, and it's just set up very well. So I think that's something fun to touch on, especially being here, being able to do this in person is awesome.
Yeah.
Even just being around this many crypto centric people, like this is one of the first hacker houses I've been out to. So being able to just chat around, and it's like, okay, everyone has their head down for 12 to 16 hours a day. Everyone's working on the same thing. It's really a cool energy and cool vibe. But yeah, there is that aspect of it does take energy. It is a little bit draining. And really, to start wrapping things up here, I'm curious, what is one thing you're excited for LightProtocol specifically? But then what's something just in the broader Solana ecosystem you'd be excited for? So you can kind of break that down bite by bite there.
Yeah. So starting with Solana, maybe even.
Yeah.
So I just love the Solana community because like those people are building stuff, and also it comes to show, like, there's this thing called Solana Pay, right? That more and more mainstream use cases will be built on Solana.
Yeah.
And I think this is going to be huge. Like, there's a huge leading indicator that there's so many builders building right now on Solana. And all of it also is connected to what I'm personally excited about with LightProtocol, is because we have this like grand goals of, you know, powering most of the mainstream use case. And when you have when you have transactions like payroll or something like Solana Pay, having this finprint privacy layer that makes sure that we can protect sensitive user data in the end of all those mainstream users. So that's what I'm super excited about. And also short term, I'm just super hyped to work with all those like protocols and developers. So yeah, a lot of excitement just on a technical point of view.
Yeah, and it's amazing to hear that. And it seems like the general sentiment of Solana with all the talent pouring in the space. And I really think it's amazing how well LightProtocol is positioned. You guys are making it out to these events, really now speaking with projects, getting it out there. You had extended period of time building, and now you guys are ready to go. And it really seems like there is a lot of demand. And I think the easiest way to look at it is just looking at the use of other privacy protocols on blockchains like Ethereum, Binance Smart Chain, other EVM chains, and then comparing it to the gap here we have on Solana, but then also the amount of institutional interest in the people who value privacy, putting it in things like DeFi, but even more simple things like payments. A lot of these other EVM chains don't really make too much sense to handle payments, whereas like Solana, we're seeing Solana Pay and the idea of making that private. So overall, I think it's just super unique to see that. It's great to have you on as well. I don't know if you have any closing remarks, Sven, but that was all of my questions for you. And it was just great hearing about LightProtocol and what you guys are building.
Yeah. It was really nice chatting with you.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Definitely. So we'll have to have you on in an update once you guys get some more stuff out.
For sure.
Maybe